Good morning, George.
Good morning, Angela. So,
As you know, it's Angela Armstrong from Azesta. We're here to have a discussion around the topic of management of self. It's the 22nd of June 2023. Do you want to introduce yourself?
so my name's George Broadhurst, and I'm currently on the Future Leaders Graduate Programme here at Mac Bristol.
And are you happy for this discussion to be recorded?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. So let's start then with the topic of time management. So why do you think it's important to manage your time effectively?
Ultimately, especially in my case, the industry and the business I'm working with is very fast moving, and there's a lot of elements that go on. It's as much like the sales graduate. It's not just selling. There's a lot of admin. There's a lot of making sure orders are correct. So being able to plan what you're doing in a certain day, it means, for instance, we have certain customers who order on a certain day. It means that we've got certain orders that come through on certain days. So planning and knowing exactly who you've got coming through is extremely vital to making sure that you're actually running effectively and you're not missing out on anything, because it's very easy when you've got so many orders and so many people to deal with to just miss something, and that one thing you miss could be the difference between further issues down the line. So it's very important to actually plan your day out and know exactly what's supposed to be happening on those days.
Okay. And what are the benefits, do you think, of managing time effectively?
I think one of the big benefits for me personally is it just sort of makes me a lot more effective in what I'm doing. Quite often I had a bad habit of sort of coming in and I have maybe a list like about 5 different things that I need to be doing, and what it would do is I would just sort of maybe, because I've got so many things to do, rather than sort of focusing on it, I would just sort of almost sort of have like a mind block of it all. And it would just mean that I almost wouldn't be working in a way that was actually very productive. So by being able to sort of plan out and map what I've got to do in a day, I can see what I've got to do, and I can sort of prioritize certain tasks. And I can make sure that everything is being done, whether it be a daily thing, a weekly thing, or a monthly thing. Everything that I've got to be doing is being done, and is being done effectively.
Great. So, could you share with me your knowledge of time management tools and techniques that you've come across?
Yeah, so personally for me, I mean, in terms of managing my time, one of the very first things I tend to do on days is a to-do list. It's quite a simple one, but nonetheless effective. I mean, by listing out every single thing that I need to be doing on that day, it allows me to then sort of look at what I'm doing and sort of work out what order I need to do them in. So, there's some things that are very time dependent. So, for instance, we've got to our orders. That's the very first thing we've got to deal with when we come in, because our transport has to go off very early. So that's always going to be the priority. And then once you complete that, what's going to be next? Is it going to be sorting stuff out in the market? Is it doing a bit of admin stuff? Is it going to be dealing with some prices? It's then you sort of work out, what you got to be doing, and it allows you to sort of focus in on what you've got to be doing in the day. But another one I've found to be very beneficial for me is a concept known as eat the frog. It's a sort of concept where the idea being, well, the sort of origin of it is that if you eat a frog in the morning, um, it's the worst thing that's going to happen to you that day. So ultimately, you got to make sure. So it sort of means that anything you do after that is always going to be better. And so that's something that I tend to do, because I tend to try and tackle the big things first, just because I know that if I leave them sort of closer to the end of the day, when we're maybe like a bit more busy, a bit more rushing, I'm going to be less likely to be able to focus in on them. Generally speaking, we're very, very busy like the first hour of the morning, but the second hour, that sort of time, is when we're a bit quieter. And that just allows me to sort of focus a bit more on sort of these bigger things that maybe I'm not as invested in, but I have to do nonetheless. It's sort of things that that are urgent, but just sort of stuff that doesn't maybe interest me. So making sure that I tackle those as soon as I can, to me, has always been quite a big help.
Great. And that really takes me into my second question then. So what tools have you found out there that really help you to prioritize the tasks that you've got?
So one of the ones I tend to sort of use and sort of categorize my tasks into is the Eisenhower matrix. So you sort of categorize them into sort of 4 categories. So things you've got to do now are things that are urgent and important. So as I previously mentioned, things like orders when you come in, they have to be done there and then. It's not something you can put off till later. It needs to be done ASAP. And also, going through orders and making sure you know what people have ordered and getting the prices right. That is vital in the sort of line of business that we do. And then you've got things maybe you need to schedule. So this is things that are important to your day, but not urgent. So some of the admin stuff I do, it tends to get sort of pushed back, especially when we get really busy in the market doing orders. Just because even though it needs to be done, it's something I can maybe do the next day or maybe next week if we are that busy. So generally speaking, I sort of tend to group that together so I can just sort of do it in one hit. So it means that I can sort of focus my attention on other things that we need to be doing that is more urgent on a daily basis. And then you've got things that are urgent but not important to you. So things such as like one of the things I've had to do quite recently is we've got a customer called Eater Pitta who they produce food and that, and they have herbs. And they basically don't want the elastic bands on them, and they keep phoning me to ask them to be removed. But simply put, it's something that needs to be done. But for me, it's not my customer, nor is it my product. So I need to make sure that someone else is doing it. So it needs to be delegated away. And so just by doing that, it allows me a lot more free time in the sort of day, especially in the morning when we are really busy. And it also just sort of gives it to someone else who may be a lot less busy in the morning. And then you sort of get things that are not urgent or not important, which is stuff that you just don't need to do. I mean, stuff that maybe just sort of gets in the way of your day-to-day running, things that aren't important to be sort of doing at that time. Maybe you find you may want to do them at a later date if there's categorically nothing to be doing, but ultimately there are things that you just don't need to be focusing on in the workplace.
Yeah. And in terms of planning tools, have you come across any? Are you using any planning tools in your role?
Yeah, so like I say, I cover a lot of different bases. So I'm mainly on the fruit department, but I also cover on things like the veg department, and I do some admin, and I also do things for like our Instagram and social media pages. So one of the things that I've been doing, like using quite a bit, is a work breakdown structure, which sort of allows you to map out all of the different roles and tasks that you may have to do, not just day to day, but sort of week to week and that. And so actually being able to sit down and realize actually not how many different things you've got to be doing, it allows you to sort of plan your time a lot better. Just because sometimes there's stuff that comes up and you don't really think about it being a thing that you do, but actually it can take up a bit more of your time. And so being able to map out all the things you're doing, whether it be daily, weekly, or even monthly, it just allows a much more effective working to be happening, and it allows me to sort of plan my time a lot nicer and a lot better compared to what I could otherwise be.
Yeah, great. Anything else?
To be fair as well, so obviously, like I say, because I'm quite busy, sometimes there are opportunities and different projects that come up that are sort of outside of my work, but I nonetheless want to consider. So I tend to use the sort of SMART objective sort of thing to decide whether it's actually worth me doing it. Because sometimes stuff comes up and you think that may actually be quite interesting. It's different, but is it actually worth doing? So for instance, when I was doing my forklift testing, so for being like specific, the reason I was choosing to do that was because it was beneficial for the company. We'd lost a few drivers, so me being able to be trained up on that was a smart idea. So that was sort of a benefit there, and measuring it, I'm a lot more. We're able to be a lot more efficient in terms of our work now because we've now got 3 people that can drive it, and it just allows us, especially in the morning when our guys who deal with our orders are so busy, it just allows for much more effective working. In terms of it being achievable, I mean, obviously, in terms of the training I had, it was only 2 hours worth of training. So it wasn't a lot of time to have to be focusing on. So it was certainly achievable to get it. Relevant wise, obviously, it is relevant to the work because it just allows us to be so much more efficient and so much more like we're able to sort of just do things a lot quicker. And in this industry, you've got to be pretty quick. People want to get going. People have got to sell stuff, and people want to be getting on the move. So being able to be as quick as you can with stuff, that's very important. And sort of time wise, it was like I say, it was a fairly quick thing to be learning. So it didn't take away too much from what I was already doing in the workplace. So it was a very handy thing to be able to learn.
Right, good, thank you. So I'm going to move on now to talk about your personal development planning. So do you have a personal development plan?
Yes, so when I very first started, I drew up a personal development plan that was focusing on my future objectives. So whether that be things in the short term, the medium term, or the long term, I sort of had objectives I wanted to be achieving for all of them.
Mm-hmm. And how did you put together that plan?
So one of the things I sort of did, especially, was sort of discussing with people in my workplace, so especially my manager, both my managers really, sort of understanding exactly what it is that I need to do to be able to say in a couple of years' time, to make sure that I am as good as I can be. And also there's that sort of thing of understanding myself. So seeing other people what they're doing, you can sort of spot where they're a lot stronger than me in relation. So being able to sort of focus on what they're doing as well and sort of identifying the skills that they've got that I need to have in the workplace is quite a key element as well.
And you mentioned also part of it was knowing yourself. What have you done to sort of get to know yourself more, become more self-aware?
So one of the things that I did was doing a 16's personality test.
Yeah.
So being able to sort of do that and sort of understand your sort of personality. So I came out as a virtuoso, so a bit introverted and sort of things like that, and understand that. So with sort of that sort of introverted side of things, it's quite a personal sort of place, and you've got to be. A lot of people, I would say, are probably extroverted compared to me. So sort of almost sort of being able to sort of maybe break out of that shell is quite an important thing to be doing, because if you sort of stay closed, you don't build up those relationships. So like one of the things that I wouldn't be a big fan of was maybe going up to people and asking if they wanted stuff. Whereas now, a lot more recently, I spoke to a guy on the phone that I sort of had a decent relationship with, and we were able to clear out I was able to clear a pallet of stuff that otherwise we wouldn't have sold, which was worth, and he sort of came back and bought more, which is over £1,000 worth of sales, which I reckon maybe even 2-3 months ago I wouldn't have done. Which is quite important. So that's quite important, especially in the sales side of things, to know your customer base and understand what they want to be doing, and sort of not only that, but have the willingness to actually go out and make sure they are happy with what they're doing.
Right. And that's really good, and it's good to see that you're reflecting. Are there any other areas that, as you sort of reflect now on the last few months, that you can see that you've developed your skills or your knowledge?
Yeah, so certainly one of the areas I wanted to develop on was my stock knowledge. So simply put, with the, like I say, on the fruit department, there is so many varieties, so many different things with the seasons and that it is very difficult to grasp. And until you actually know the seasons, until you know what's going to be coming in the next maybe couple of weeks, couple of months, when certain things are going to be coming in, it's difficult to actually be able to properly learn, because obviously being in an environment where everyone else knows so much, you could find yourself in a position where you may think you know what's happening, and they could have a lot more knowledge than you. So I've been trying to develop my knowledge of the seasons in terms of what we're getting in. So one of the things that I've actually been doing is I've been keeping a seasonal diary. It's only something recently I've been starting to do, but what it's been able to do is make it very clear, like all color code and stuff, to see when seasons are changing for different products. So
Yeah.
whilst it's not overly useful, like for instance, right now, in about a year's time, when we're coming into say this time next year, I can see, when did certain products start, what varieties did we have in, what countries are they coming from, and things like that. And so understanding that is super important in terms of the role that I'm in, because
Mhm.
I need to have as much knowledge on the stock as I can before I can really sort of be involved in dealing with certain customers, because like I say, they already there's a lot of people in this place who have got 10 decades of experience in the industry, who will
Yeah.
always know, who will probably know more than me. So getting as much knowledge as I can is absolutely important in terms of what I need to do to develop.
Great. And do you keep a log of your learning?
My learning, in terms of sort of my personal development, I mean, I don't necessarily keep a direct log. I mean, I sort of have consistent communication with people in terms of what we do. I mean, we have meetings in person usually, and it's sort of very clear in terms of outlining what I need to be doing to improve, and what I need to be doing to grow, and what I need to be doing to sort of focus on over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
But admittedly, it's not necessarily logged. I mean, sometimes our meetings are put into we sort of have like a consolidation email every now and again, but generally speaking, it's a lot more sort of informal.
Mm-hmm. And on the system, though, on the learning management system, do you keep a log of different learning activities that you've done?
I do keep a personal log of stuff on there. So things that I
Mm-hmm.
do on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis that I'm learning and developing on is definitely something that I'm keeping a record of.
Yeah.
So obviously stuff that we're doing coursework wise, I'm obviously keeping a track of, and any new skills or anything new that I'm learning is also being tracked there. So I mean, I do have a
Right.
log in terms of that there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously there's maybe things that it's possible that I'm missing out on things just because we do things maybe slightly differently here in terms of being a lot more in person, a lot more face to face rather than
Yeah.
through emails.
And who do you involve then? Who, in terms of discussing and monitoring your development progress?
So in terms of monitoring and discussing, generally speaking, it's my sort of line manager as well as the sort of company manager. They're the two main people that I refer to. So, like I say, my line manager, he's got some of the best knowledge of fruit in not just maybe in the UK, but possibly in the world. Like he is one of the strongest people when it comes to knowledge and understanding
Mm-hmm.
the industry. And so being able to discuss things with him is, it's very important because he just knows so much stuff compared to a lot of other people. So being able to sort of have those discussions with him and knowing, he knows, he's been there and done it, if that makes sense. He knows
Yeah.
everything. So being able to sort of learn off of him is quite good. And as well as that, my sort of the divisional director, he's able to sort of direct me in terms of developing me in other areas, not necessarily. So things like the admin, things like going on to do different tasks, like for instance, covering on the veg is quite
Mm-hmm.
important. But I also do get feedback from the people I work with. So in terms of maybe how I deal with other customers, maybe smaller things
Yeah.
that I could be working on to develop myself there.
Mm-hmm. Good. That's good. Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you very much. So we can end our recording now.
Some stuff.